White Rose Library's Executive Manager, and I hope that most of you will have heard of the White Rose Libraries, but for those of you who haven't, the White Rose Libraries is the local regional consortium collaboration between the Universities of Leeds, University of Sheffield and the University of York. It's been going for about 15 or 20 years, and it's involved in all sorts of areas of collaboration across the universities, from research bids and research grants. And in the area of libraries in particular, we run a number of important services, including White Rose Research Online and White Rose eThesis Online, the institutional repository. So collaborative activity, a variety of other things that we're looking at, the services that we're investigating. But one of the newest developments that the White Rose Libraries have initiated this year is the White Rose University Press, the university's new open access digital publishing service. This is the newest university press in the UK, and it's also the UK's only jointly managed university press. There's no other university press that's run in a collaborative model quite like this one. So we think there's some interesting things that we're experimenting with here, and we're hoping that this is going to be a real success. This is just a screenshot of our website, universitypress.whiterose.ac.uk, for those of you who want to go and have a look at it later on. So what I wanted to talk about really today was to run through the reasons why we've established this press and what we hope to achieve with it. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a sales pitch about the sorts of services that it offers, and perhaps encourage some of the people in this room to consider University Press as a possible route for publication. So there's fundamentally three reasons why we set up the press. And the first of those is about supporting academics within the consortium. So we get approached as libraries, we get approached periodically by academics from across the three universities who have an idea for a journal, or are starting to think about something they'd like to publish and are looking for a route that doesn't involve the big commercial publishers. They're trying to find some other way of getting their scholarly outputs out there, or they've got a new idea for a journal that they'd like to set up. And maybe the libraries, we deal with publishing stuff, don't we? You must know something about this. And we were getting lots of these queries, and we weren't really in a position to help them. We couldn't really field them in any very effective way. But there's evidently a need out there. There are lots of academics out there who are looking for an alternative route for publication. So we thought that setting up our own support network, our own infrastructure that those academics could tap into, would be a useful and effective service for them. There are, if we've sort of gone around and talked to various academics scattered across the consortium, there are lots of people who are running a small journal on a WordPress site or on a server shoved under someone's desk somewhere. And it's that idea that we can provide a coherent, consistent infrastructure that those academics can tap into, that those researchers can tap into. And I think here in particular we're thinking about new journals, or journals that are being set up by early career researchers, by postgraduate researchers, even masters and undergraduate students. We've been approached since the press has been started by a number of different groups across the consortium who are interested in starting publishing activities for the kinds of researchers who don't normally find an output for that for their scholarly works. So responding to that kind of academic need was a key driver. It was sort of the trigger, I suppose, for us to start thinking about setting up a press. But the more that we thought about it, the more that we realised that by providing our own infrastructure, we were really going to be providing a service for the future. So I'll talk a little bit later about all the services that the press provides, but just to say at the outset that it publishes journals, but also monographs. We're interested in both of the sort of key traditional scholarly outputs, as well as a whole variety of other things as well. But we're interested in monographs, and actually the more we thought about it, the more we think that monographs may be the most important thing that we're offering through this platform. Because our expectation is that in the future, universities are going to have to be publishing monographs as open access outputs. I think this is a sort of relatively well-established concept around journal publishing. Open access journal publishing is what HEFCE requires for the REF, and people are already geared up for that for REF 2020. But there were lots of rumours a few years back that HEFCE were going to require the same for monographs at some point in the future. And actually in just the last couple of weeks we've had some clarification on that. HEFCE just last week confirmed that in the ref after the next one, not ref 2020 but the one after that, they are likely to be mandating open access monographs as part of their requirements. So having something in place right now that can support that approach gives us an advantage, I think, gives something to the universities that positions us well to support academics. But actually HEFCE went further and said that in the next ref, in ref 2020, the universities will gain points, they will gain credit in the environment sector of the ref submission for open access monographs as well. So they're saying right now that open access publishing is going to be important for the next ref, let alone the one after that. So it was anticipating that, it was the expectation that that was coming that led us to decide that setting up a university press was a worthwhile endeavour, that this was something that would support academics in publishing in formats that increasingly are going to be required to publish them. And then the final part about support here is really just about improving interfaces. As librarians, we're constantly faced with the criticism that students have, that academics have, that teachers have, around the interfaces of digital material. And I'm thinking specifically here about e-books, e-textbooks. They're a nightmare in terms of the user experience. There are all sorts of limitations, all sorts of restrictions around them, kind of limitations on how many people can access an ebook at any given time, and then kind of can you download it, or can you load it onto a Kindle or onto a tablet. Very, very clumsy, very, very clunky, and lots of ways they're sort of built to restrict access. But we wanted to get around that. We wanted to find a way of publishing or getting scholarly material published that was as nice to use, as easy to use as we can make it. And again, the solution that we came up with, or at least one of the solutions we've come up with, is setting up our own press. That seems to be the best way to get around some of the inbuilt blocks in the existing publishing infrastructure. So support was a really, really key part of what we were trying to do. Now the second key reason why we were building press is about getting research out there. It's about disseminating research to as wide an audience as we possibly can. And this is absolutely part of the open access agenda. As I said right from the outset, the University Press, White Rose University Press, is an open access publisher. So all of the material that we publish will be published under a Creative Commons license, most likely CC BY, as open as we can make it. There may be occasions when we may need to do things under CC BY non-commercial or non-derivative, but those would be a minority. The aim is to get as much as we can under a CC BY license, as open as we can, which means it's completely free to readers to access it. It can be disseminated to a global audience. There are no paywalls, no firewalls, no restrictions at all on how many times you can download it, on what you can download it on. Anyone within the institutions can read it, anyone outside the institutions can read it, and that means that we can reach a global audience. I was talking just a moment ago about the idea of researchers in developing countries wanting to access research, and it was only a few months ago, maybe at the end of last year, that the Ebola crisis was in full swing in West Africa, and there was evidence that suggested that there was research out there that would have been important to people on the ground, that was restricted. It was hidden behind paywalls. It was hidden behind firewalls that people couldn't access. That's the kind of thing we want to get around. So the University Press is absolutely part of a sort of ethical, moral decision to support open access. It's a philosophical standpoint that the universities and the libraries are taking in setting this up. It's something we really strongly believe in. So as I say, access for a global audience, really ensuring that research is read by as wide an audience as possible. And there are all sorts of metrics that support this idea that making material open access does mean that it gets read by more people. It gets read more, it gets cited more, it gets used more, it has greater impact. And going back to the more venal reasons for supporting open access, that's good for your ref ranking as well. That's something which actually is an effective and useful thing to be doing just in terms of your own career progression. And again, going back to the teaching material, the e-books, we think that open access publishing through this route gives better access to teaching materials. One of the things that we're experimenting with, one of the things that we're exploring with the press, is the idea of making more teaching materials available through this. So we're currently talking to the MOOCs team here at Sheffield about taking some of that MOOC content and converting it into other formats so that it's not just available within the sort of short window of time that the MOOCs are running, but is actually accessible as an ebook or as a sort of companion text that goes alongside the MOOC. So taking research and taking material that's being written by academics within the institutions and making it available as teaching texts. And then the third reason that we're doing this is because we have a problem in scholarly communication. Commercial publishers are bleeding libraries dry. They're bleeding institutions dry with above inflation increases for the last 10 years, the last 20 years, the last 30 years. We're paying hand over fist for access to material that you, academics, scholars, are producing on behalf of the universities. The universities are paying for you to produce that research, and then we're paying again to access it once it's gone through the filter of a commercial publisher. That's not a sustainable model. It's already at breaking point. And the big publishers, the Elsevier's and the Wiley's of this world, are not really changing their behaviour. We're seeing that again at the moment with negotiations ongoing with Elsevier. We have to find some way of changing that landscape and giving power back to academics. You're the ones who are producing this research. We have to give power back to you to have more control over how that material is used, so that it isn't hidden away, that it isn't just delivering massive profits to the publishers, that it's actually benefiting you as academics, benefiting the institutions. So giving power back to you as authors. The university press does not ask for copyright. If you've already submitted articles into journals, or you've got contracts for monographs, you'll know that one of the first things the publishers try and make you do is sign away your right to copyright of that material. Well, the university press has no interest at all in any copyright. That remains entirely with you as authors. This is, however, something of an experiment. I'm a little bit wary about using that phrase. I talked about this being an experiment quite a lot when we started with the press, and I think that's a slightly misleading way of describing it. The idea of the press is not an experiment. I think there's a real commitment institutionally within the libraries, within the universities, to setting up a university publishing platform, the university publishing service. However, the model that we're using, the financial model that we're using to fund this, I think that is an experiment. I'll talk in a moment about how we're doing it. It's one experiment among many others. There are other publishing endeavours that are being set up at the moment. So I said this was the newest university press in the UK. Actually, there's been about 3 or 4 that have been set up in the last 12 or 18 months. University College London, UCL Press have just set one up, quite high profile. University of Westminster, University of Cardiff have just launched a university press. And they're all following slightly different funding models, slightly different financial models. And I think this is a sort of a phase in scholarly communications where we're letting 1,000 flowers bloom, see which one is the most successful. And if one particular model proves to be the most sustainable, to be the one that works most effectively with the way that academic funding is structured, with the way that universities operate, and with the way that you as scholars operate, then that's something which we can potentially shift across to if it turns out that ours is not that model. But this is the experiment. The idea is that we're experimenting with one particular financial model to support the press, and we'll see whether or not that is sustainable or successful in the long term. So, a little bit about what the press actually does, what services we offer. We are a fully functional university press. One of the challenges that we faced in setting up the university press, and one of the reasons I think why there hasn't been a great deal of activity around university publishing for the last 20 or 30 years, is the idea of actually going out there and setting up from whole cloth a completely new publishing operation. That's quite a big task. But one of the things that's changed recently, along with changes in technology that just make digital publishing that little bit easier, is the rise of 1 or 2 companies that are starting to provide publishing services as a third-party provider. So we've actually partnered with another company, a company called Ubiquity Press, who are an open access publisher in their own right. But they also provide a whole range of publishing services to other institutions. So the White Rose University Press's back end, the production end, is with an established publishing operation. So we're not just kind of desperately scrubbing around learning stuff as we're talking to you. We've actually got the backing of an established infrastructure that we can tap into, which means that we can provide all of these services, all of the things that you would expect of a traditional publishing operation. So, extensive editorial assistance, the copy editing, the typesetting, the layout, the design, indexing in various online databases and discovery indexes, long-term preservation, so that you can be sure that anything you publish through the University Press will still be there in 10 or 15 years, and a variety of metrics so that you can be tracking how your material is being used. You can see how many times it's being downloaded or being read. There's also a print-on-demand service, and I think that's really, really key. Going back to this idea that monograph publishing is going to be a key thing that we're delivering. There's still a lot of evidence that says that people still prefer to read books in print. So everything that we publish will be available online as a digital artifact, a digital object, first and foremost. That's where it will be, that's where it's free to use. But there will also be a print-on-demand service for monographs, so that you can purchase a paper copy of our books. And we think that's really important, because that is still how academics generally are engaging with monographs, with those longer texts. That's also where there's some potential to make a little bit of money back. The print-on-demand is not free. You do have to pay for those books, and there is some small profit margin there. Which means that as academics you can still publish a monograph through the White Rose University Press and not entirely forsake the small royalties that you might expect by publishing through a commercial publisher. And again, I was speaking earlier, there's still fairly good evidence that says that the availability of an online version of a book, a free online version of a book, does not negatively affect the sales of the print copy, because people are still finding that monographs have to be read as a physical object. So in a sense, the online version is the free sampler. It's the thing that people can kind of go in and look at and decide, yes, okay, this is worth investing 10 quid, 15 quid, 20 quid on getting the print copy. So that print on demand is a really key element. And because we're a small press, because we're working closely with this very efficient outside company, we've got a very fast turnaround time. We can get stuff through our peer review process in weeks rather than months, and that means that we can get stuff published much more quickly than some of the sort of the leviathans of the publishing world. At the bottom there I mentioned low APCs, and this is where I talk about our business model. So the way that we're funding this, the press, the way that we're funding the operation is as a gold open access publisher, which means that we're asking authors, or more commonly the Authors Institution, to pay up front to make the material available for free. Now with journals that means we're charging an article processing charge, an APC, and we work very closely with Ubiquity to make sure that APC is as low as we can possibly get it. You're only paying for the services that we're providing. There's no profit margin built into that. We're not making any profit out of this operation. So our highest APC, the APC for the full service, all of those things that are on that screen, is £360 per article. Now, I don't know how many people have been involved in APC payments or have had any kind of publishing. I can see one face back there. He's very closely involved in APCs. The average APC for a gold open access journal through a commercial publisher in the UK at the moment is over £1,500, £1,500. So we think that £360 is actually pretty good value. That's pretty cheap for the services that we're offering. But if you're thinking about setting up a journal, for example, if you've got an idea for a journal, if there's a corner of the market that you think is not being tapped into, there's knowledge that you want to get out there, then 360 is the maximum we're asking for. Actually, we can run journals that don't use all of these services, where some of that typesetting and layout is being done by the editorial board rather than by the press, and we're providing hosting services and some of the other elements here for significantly less than £360. In fact, we can even do it if we're just looking at a hosted journal for nothing at all. So that's a sliding scale. 360 is our top price, and it goes all the way down to essentially zero. So we think that economic model is, that's the experiment, and that's the thing that we're trying to work out whether that is sustainable. But we think this is a workable model. There's a similar approach with monographs, a book processing charge, a BPC rather than APC. Those prices are necessarily higher because we're talking about much larger outputs, significantly bigger, and there's more work around editorial interventions and typesetting and layout and copy editing elements. So an average monograph of, say, 120,000 words, text heavy, would probably cost in the region of £4,500. And that's a much bigger sum to lay your hands on, and we've got some support on our website about where there are potentially sources of funding to support that kind of thing. But as part of setting up the press and as part of trying to get this established, the universities have put in a waiver fund, so we do have a pot of money to help support some initial publications. So don't let that £4,500 put you off. If you've got a monograph in your drawer that you're thinking of publishing through this route, we can probably come to some arrangement. We can discuss whether or not that's something we could potentially fund ourselves and support that process. So what do we publish? Well, the idea is that we'll be publishing journals, we'll be publishing monographs, we'll be publishing textbooks. I talked about the MOOCs, and we're looking at whether or not we can publish interactive ebooks, so taking not just the sort of written and audio-visual content that we can embed in an ebook, but also things like quizzes and sort of interactive elements, adding that into the app as well. We're looking at some of the sort of grey material, the grey literature that often struggles to find a home in commercial publishing, things like conference proceedings. And I think an area where we've got, we're quite excited about, we think there's a real opportunity here, is the idea of the short form monograph. That's the monograph that's, say, 30, 40,000 words. Way too big for a journal article, not nearly big enough for a commercial publisher to think about publishing it as a book. There are very, very few publishers who are doing anything around short form monographs. There are one or two, but very, very few. And we think that's exactly the sort of thing, the kind of publishing that we can support really effectively through something like the White Rose University Press. That sort of stuff, that research that's crying out for a way to get out there. We can support that sort of publishing. And the idea is that we'll be publishing across a broad range of disciplines, as well as looking for those niche subjects that don't yet have a home in the current scholarly ecosystem. And I suppose one of the first questions that we get asked when I go out and talk about the press to academics and to scholars is, where's the reputation here? This is a new press, isn't this just vanity publishing? So we've made some real efforts to try and make sure that this has got the scholarly integrity, the research integrity that is crucial to ensuring that this is seen as a trusted, as a valid academic publisher. It is not a vanity press. So we've got editorial board has just convened. Lots of very prestigious academics from across the consortium. Within Sheffield, Professor Bob Shoemaker from the Arts and Humanities faculty, and Professor Wyn Morgan, the PVC for Teaching and Learning here at Sheffield, both members of that board, and we've got equivalent sort of figures across York and Leeds as well, PVCs, deans, heads of faculty. And they're really, really keen to see this succeed, but they're also really, really keen to ensure that we aren't just publishing any old thing that gets sent to us. I was in the second editorial board meeting just a week ago, and there's a lot of engagement from around the table. There's a lot of debate, a lot of discussion, and a lot of tearing apart of some of the early submissions that we've had. So there's a real commitment to making sure that we're publishing good quality academic output. As part of the infrastructure around this, we've also, of course, got a very strong, rigorous process of peer review, sending out to external peer reviewers. We use anti-plagiarism checking software. We're adhering to code guidelines, Committee on Publication Ethics. As I say, at the end of the day, what we're ensuring is that we've got material that has got open licenses. So this is Creative Commons licenses to make sure that this material is ultimately accessible to the entire scholarly audience, and not just a restricted institutional audience that are able to get past that firewall. So that's me. Thank you. My last slide is always just this one, which is basically we're open for submissions now. If you would like to publish something, if you've got an idea for a journal, if you've got a monograph on your desk, if you've got that short form monograph idea, then get in touch with us at universitypress.whiterose.ac.uk because we would love to talk to you. Thank you.